Okay, now you can hear me?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, clearly.
Okay.
Clearly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Assalamualaikum and very good morning to all of you.
Waalaikumsalam. And good
Hope that
morning.
you all are doing well today. And I believe that most of you have attended a few PG Chem courses before this. So today I'm going to guide you with the thesis writing in educational technology. So I'm going to slideshow. Okay, for thesis writing, I will focus this morning to three things, which are structure of thesis, writing the finding, and also how to discuss your finding. Okay, for the structure of thesis, normally we have 5 chapters. Okay, so chapter 1 is introduction, chapter 2 is literature review, then your chapter 3 is methodology. Okay, then for the chapter 4 is your result, but some for those who do development or you create an apps or you develop a website. So your chapter 4 is actually your development chapter. Okay. Then chapter 5 is your discussion and conclusion. This is the basic 5 chapter for those who doing your thesis for the master project or for your research project. Okay. So you have to follow this 5 or 6 chapter. Okay, then we focus to the first chapter, the introduction chapter. So I would like to advise to you to use or to include all these topic, okay? All this topic and subtopic. Okay, I think you are familiar with all these title, this topic. Okay, so, and I think if I'm not mistaken, in Prof. Zaida's slide before, she also guide you with the subtopic for the proposal, right? Okay, so this one is actually same with the Prof. Zaida. So maybe just one or two different. If I'm not mistaken, for the research rationale. Okay? So for the research rationale, so I would like to advise you to include that one too in your thesis. Okay. So it's actually the reason for you to conducting the study. Okay. Then the rationale part should answer the need for conducting the said research, and it also justify the significance and novelty of your study, your research. Okay. Then I think the rest would be the same. So you also you need to include the research important. So I will advise too that you should put in subtopic. Okay, so you should address if the important for the student, the important for the maybe the teacher if you do your research at school. Okay, so and also include the KPM and so on. All right, then you also need to include the research scope and limitation. But actually for the limitation, we have actually another subtopic in chapter 5. But for this in chapter 1, so you just have to make it short and simple. as long as you address the limitation of your research. Okay, then you should also include operational definition. So for this one, you have to make sure the keyword your research is included as a subtopic where you have to explain about the keyword. Okay, so normally you can find the keyword from your abstract, from your title, and also from your research objective and research question. Okay, so then make sure that all chapter you must end with a summary. Okay, to conclude actually the content of the chapter itself. Okay, you can just interrupt me if you have question. Okay, so I will move to chapter 2. Okay, for chapter 2 is quite flexible. Actually, depends on your research. Okay, so of course, the first must be introduction. You have to introduce the chapter, the content of the chapter, what you're going to explain, what you're going um, to put details. Okay, so after the introduction, normally we will start with theory, but I believe that you will say that theory for the theoretical framework in chapter 1. So not maybe you think that only the PhD student need to include the theoretical framework. But for the master taught course, master mixed mode, maybe you don't have your theoretical framework. So it's okay. Even though that you didn't include your theoretical framework in chapter 1, but you have to discuss, because this theory actually the umbrella for your research. Okay, so your research actually must be actually under the theory. Okay, so you have to select which theory actually best to fit your research. Okay, so you don't you must include or explain the available theory. Then at the end you have um, to to tell. Okay, so which theory actually best for your research. Okay, so this here in chapter 2 you must be critical to discuss or to present your writing. Okay, then maybe you can include your variable, your research variable. So maybe you can have variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, and so on. Okay, and then if you doing preliminary studies, okay, to actually support why the rationale, why you choose or you want to do this, so you can include in chapter 2. But in chapter 1, actually you can highlight about your preliminary study to support why you plan to do this research. Okay, and end up with the summary. Okay, if you look at this, actually, if you want to actually organize, okay, your chapter 2 content, so you must start with a broad one, broad topic, and then to narrow down to focus of your research. So for example, here we start with the learning theory, then you continue with the learning model or strategy. So maybe you want to explain about the learning platform you use if you develop or you run your research using any platform. Okay, then you can also describe about the learning activity, your instrument, your research variable, and end up with the focus of your subject, where maybe you want to tell about how you select subject for to run or to conduct the research. Okay. Next, we'll go for the chapter 3. So chapter 3 is about methodology. Okay, for the methodology, about 10 subtopic that you have to include. Okay, so the first one is introduction. Then you have to explain about your research design and continue with research procedure. For the research procedure, I would like to advise you to include like a figure, a flow of your research. Okay, so the reader or the examiner can understand better if you include a figure or the flow chart. Okay, and next you can tell about the population and sampling. So if you do experimental study, so maybe you want to explain about the control group, to explain about the experimental group. Then you continue with the instrument. So where in the instrument you have to describe about the reliability and validity. I think that you already clear the difference between reliability and validity because all of you already um, take the research method class, right? Research method course. Okay, then you can tell or you can describe about the pilot study you done. Okay, then if normally for the PhD student, you might want to include the research track. Okay, then the data analysis procedure and continue with research ethics and end up with the summary. Okay, then the fourth chapter for those not doing development. Okay, so you have to present okay your result. You of course start with the introduction first. Then you have to organize okay your chapter 4 to follow your research question. So that's how you are going to explain the result. Not just pick any topic you want, any objective you want. No, you have to follow your research question. So if you like, sorry, if you have 4 research question, okay, so you have to include 4 topic for all the research question. Okay, so research question 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you want to do or to include the question, the subtopic, so you can include, okay, to explain detail for the each subtopic. Okay, then end up with the summary for chapter 4. Okay, then for the chapter 5, our last chapter in thesis structure. So you're going to have discussion and conclusion. Okay. So start with the introduction. Then you have to summarize the finding of your research. Okay. Maybe around 1 or 2 page. Okay. Then you have discuss because this last chapter is to discuss your finding. So you have to discuss your finding or your result also based on your research question. So if you have 4 research questions, so make it 4 subtopic that focus to all the research question to answer, to discuss all the research question. Okay, then for the next one, you can continue with research implication and then research limitation and also recommendation for future research and end with the conclusion for chapter 5. Right? Okay, today I'm going to also to explain a bit on chapter 5 for a few subtopic on the chapter 5. Okay, for the summary of finding, this is example that maybe you can use. Okay, you can put in your writing. So the research suggests that blah 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 blah. Okay, so you can start your writing with the data confirm that, and you can continue the result, the finding of your research. Also, the finding indicates that. Okay, so this is a few starting sentence for you to use in the summary of finding. Okay, then after the summary of finding, you have to go for the discussion for your finding. So the discussion chapter actually where you delve into the meaning, the importance and the relevance of your result. So you have to focus explaining and evaluating what you have found. Okay, and show how it relates to your literature review that you done in chapter 2. Okay, and also the research question. Okay. So 4 key elements under the when you want to discuss your finding. So you can based on the interpretation. So what do the results mean? I think a bit noisy.
Dr. Shikin, sorry.
Yeah.
Dr. Shikin, can you mute the participant because we have, the interference from the other participant.
All right. Okay. Wait.
Dr. Shikin, don't forget to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? I think yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Fendi. Because I used two device. Okay, so the four key elements. So the first one is the interpretation. So what do the results mean? And then you maybe discuss about the implication of the results. So why do the results matter? And then the limitation. What can the result tells us? Okay, and also the recommendation. What practical action or scientific studies should follow? Okay, for the interpretation, so there's a few sentences to start with that you can find here. So for example, in line with the hypothesis, so this research, blah, 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 okay? So also the second, third, and the fourth one, okay? So this is to help you, to guide you, how you are going to start your discussion for the interpretation, your finding, your result, to interpret your result. Okay, then for the implication, okay, also I put here a few example. So your writing, your paragraph can start with all these sentences. Okay, first for example, the this result should be taken into account when considering how to blah blah blah. Okay. And actually, you can find more if you search how to start discuss your finding if you Google it, so you can find more actually example. So then if you want to acknowledge the limitation, so I will advise you to use some of these sentences. Okay. So the reliability of this data is impaired by, then you explain about your finding. Okay. And then for the recommendation, okay, further research is needed to establish something. So you also need to explain or recommend what your research or further research can do. Okay. Then just now you saw all the sentences that you can start with when you want to discuss your finding. But when you actually want to start writing, So you actually have to find the story in your data. Okay, so you must think, and you also have to refer to your research question back. Okay, to make sure that you actually answer your research question. Okay, once you have the story of your data, so you can present the result and then explain it. Okay, so when you want to start explain it, of course you have to state your finding. So not just start with the discussion. So tell first the finding of your research question 1, for example. Okay, then you interpret and explain your finding. And also you have to relate with the data value, or to specify the data value that you actually explain in chapter 4, the result. Okay, then you have to critically discuss the finding, and you must support with the previous research. Okay, so for the literature review, so actually there you already include all the finding from the previous research, right? So in chapter 5, it's time for you to relate, okay, your finding with the finding from the previous research. Okay, you also have to consider the negative or the contradict references, okay? Not just highlight about the positive, or about that your research is same with the previous, but sometimes maybe there's a part where the between your finding and the previous is not exactly same or contra. Okay, so you have to mention also about that. So there actually the critical, the examiner can see how critical you are discussing your finding. Okay, so you also have to include your own interpretation. So you have your own opinion, your own assumption. You can also add that one, but you need to follow by supported reference. Okay. For the when you discuss your finding, okay, there's a guideline for you. So you have to consistently use this research, okay, this study, to refer to your own research. Okay, and on the right column, okay, so you can see the example sentence that you can start with. So, for example, the finding of this research, then a previous study in Belgrade, Smith and Geva found that, okay, that's where you can see actually the academic writing is different with the newspaper or magazine writing, okay? So you have to follow this guideline. Okay, then when you want to make a reference to similarities or differences in approach or finding, so you can start your writing with maybe the finding of the study contradict those of Smith's and so on, and then the finding confirm that blah blah blah, right? So this is just the guideline, so you can find your own. Then if you want to present a perfect tense to highlight the recent relevance of your research in comparison with earlier research, so you have to referring to in the simple past, okay? So this is for those who are, especially when you change your proposal writing into the complete thesis, okay? This also where you actually have to recheck all the grammar, okay? So whether it's you already, because in the proposal you use you might, you or you will, okay? So for this complete thesis, after you pass your proposal, you want to do the whole chapter 1 to 5, you have to recheck your all the sentence that you use in proposal to show that you already done the research. Okay, so make sure you check all. Okay, then I already include a few samples here. So for example, here critical thinking ability used by the respondent. Okay, so for this chapter 1, even though that you actually refer to research questions, so don't make the title in question mark. Okay, so just point out the content, okay, for the research question. So here you can state your finding and maybe point out the value. So for example, 10 out of 12 critical thinking abilities. So rather than you can just only uh, the end finding. Okay, so you can also explain your finding. So after you state your finding, then explain about the finding, and then you have to include the previous research finding or outcome, okay, to relate with your finding. Okay, then in the sample 2 also, you state your finding that top 3 student, okay, so you mention how many, the value, okay, then you explain the finding, and also you have to include or you relate to the previous research that you found or you write already in your chapter 2. Okay, so why you do chapter 2 is not for just to complete or to prepare the literature. So, but actually you're going to use again or to relate back when you discuss your finding in chapter 5. Okay, then in sample 3, okay, there's a sentence that actually you give your own interpretation. Okay, but after that, you need to support your interpretation. Okay, so you have to support and relate or support with the previous research done before. Okay, and then also to put not only one, so to put or to include many finding from the previous research. Okay, then come to the don'ts or actually what you shouldn't do. Okay, things to avoid in writing the finding for your dissertation. So you have to make sure that you are not presenting result from other studies in your own finding. Okay, so you just like just like take the finding, the output. So you just compare, not just put the finding from the research, the previous research. Okay, then also in chapter 5, you shouldn't put your raw data anymore, because your raw data is actually you have put in the chapter 4. Okay, so make sure you only just highlight the end, okay, for chapter 5. Okay, then do not use vague or non-specific phrases in the finding section. Okay, other than that, don't introduce new result, because chapter 5 you already want to conclude, to discuss only about the result, not to introduce a new result. And don't make inflated claims, and don't undermine your research. Okay, and also only provide explanation of finding, so to relate to the key themes, to your research question, to your hypothesis. Okay, that's it. So this is the references that I referred to. Then you can also then fill in the attendance link for today or for this session. I think Dr. Norasykin already include in the chat. Okay, that's it. Thank you everyone for listening. So I think I open for Q&A.
Dr. Shikin, we have one question from the chat session.
Okay.
About the difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework.
Okay, between theoretical framework, okay, and conceptual framework. Okay, Faiza. Right. So for the theoretical framework, so you, especially for those doing PhD and master for research, okay, normally you have to include this part. Okay. Theoretical is about you explain about the theory behind or under your research. Okay. So it's about maybe you can tell about the learning theory. Okay, so the learning theory that you when you conduct your research, you must base on any theory, right? So you have to include the theoretical framework where you actually explain how this theory um, relate to your research. Okay, so the theoretical framework you have to include the figure. So how each item actually connect to each other. Okay. Then basically you not just focus on the main point or the main keyword, especially if you refer to your research title and research question. So you have to make sure that you relate all the main point in that question in the research article or your title and relate with the theory of your research. Okay, but the conceptual framework is more like simple or not like the variable. Okay, so the variable that you use in your research, so you have to show how this first variable will affect the second variable, or then the connection. I mean the connection for all the keyword in your research. Then you have to put or to explain in the conceptual framework. Okay, where actually you no more discuss about the theory in the conceptual framework, but if you do, you can also include, but you more about the like a research procedure. If you know about the research procedure, you actually explain your research environment. Okay, so you explain about your research environment. So you there actually you going to put under the conceptual framework, but also it's not same with the research procedure. Okay, so you tell about the environment. Okay, about the environment, all the elements, all the misal for example the learning activity. Okay, the platform. Okay, the what else? Your learning strategy. So this one actually you include in conceptual framework, but the theoretical framework is only about the theory behind your research.
Okay, Dr. Zikin, there are another question from Mawada and Crystal Wong. So the first one is, what is the difference between background of study and statement of problem? Is number one, and number two is so if we are doing master, can we simply skip theoretical framework or we just do conceptual framework only? So another question from Dr. Diana, then you can read from the chat session. Okay, Dr. Zikin.
Okay, from Crystal Wong, the difference between background of study and statement. Okay, background of study and the statement of problem. So background of study actually you explain about your research gap, about the problem of your why you conduct this research. Okay, so actually when you plan to do the research, you actually read or find the issue with the current situation, right? For example, the issue right now, the issue with the online learning. Okay, there must be some issue with the online learning. So that's the current situation. Maybe you find out that when do online learning, students are not engaged with the learning process. So that's the actually the issue or the problem that you found once you after you reading, right? You do a few reading. So that's actually the root of the problem. Okay, so you're going to explain in background of the study. Okay, but the statement of problem actually you're going to conclude the background of the study and relate with your research objective. So for the statement of problem, it's actually for the master thought course, it's about like 2 paragraph. Okay, like 1 or 2 paragraph. Okay, but for the PhD student, it can take up to 1 page or 1.5 page. Okay, so you just conclude from background of study and then relate to the research objective. So that's the difference between the background study and statement of problem. Statement of problem is much shorter. Background study can take maybe like 10, for PhD student, maybe like 10 pages. Okay. For the background study for the master thought course, maybe just about 3 pages, something like that. Okay, then Mawada. Okay, if we are doing master top course, okay, normally master top course, they will not, you are just doing the surface, actually, the surface. The research is like general, not going to be too deep, right? Okay, so for the master top course, so normally we don't include the theoretical framework. Okay, but if you do, if you want to add the theoretical framework, it's okay. But actually, no, you're not actually not testing the theoretical part, right? So you are just doing the surface research. That's why for the top course, we not you can include, but if you didn't include, it's also fine. But master full research, master and PhD, so you have to include your theoretical framework. And actually, this one is based on your supervisor also, okay? And also for others department, other program, they might want you to include. But for the educational technology, as mostly we just go for the conceptual framework for your TC, for your master thought course, okay? But if you want to include, it's okay. But if you not include, also fine. Okay, more question. Okay, Dr. Diana, why some of the students have up to 6 or 7 chapter for their thesis? So I think I already told you before that when you do your research, some of you might have might create something, create mobile apps. They might develop a website. Okay, so you will have extra chapter if you do that. For example, you develop module. Okay, so if you have that development, okay, so you have to put that one in one specific chapter. After chapter 3, for example, you are developing mobile apps. Okay, so in chapter 4, for others, they might put their result. But for those who doing development, so you must put the development of the apps. So you have to explain the requirement, okay, for to develop the apps. You might explain the model that you use to develop the apps. Then you can screenshot all the main screen of your apps, and then you have to explain in that chapter. Okay, and then maybe for those who doing module, so they will have another chapter to explain about the module content. Okay. Okay, Najiha, I think I already include in the answer before about the development chapter. Okay, then from Asara. Okay, do we need to prepare other slides that show our raw data during Viva? Yes, I will advise you to prepare. Maybe you can just also prepare your thesis. I mean your words. Okay, because normally your thesis once you ready for Viva, so means that actually you have complete your writing, right? So just because in your words in your full thesis, so you must include all the raw data, right? Okay, so I mean not the raw data that really raw, something that you already because for the PhD sometimes the raw data can be too many, right? Okay, so maybe you can just put a few sample for your raw data. Okay, so you can just use your words. Okay, the words document. If there is a question from the examiner, so you can just show that one. So don't but if you want to do or prepare another slide, that's also okay. Okay, so if you just use your words document to show your raw data, that also okay. Okay, Nurisha, do we need to focus on only one problem for master level? One problem, do you mean one research question or what is actually? To focus on, cannot. Maybe Nurisha, can you explain more about your question? Do we need to focus? Oh, okay. Okay, one problem statement. Okay. So problem statement I said before is actually where you conclude the background of the study. Actually inside you conclude the issue behind or the problem with the current situation. That's why you want to solve the problem or you want to suggest the something that can help to solve the problem. So you relate to your research question, right? Or your research objective. So problem is actually can be like 2-3 problems, can be all 4 or 5 problems. So you just like conclude, put in one sentence, or you can list your main issues from your background study. Then you relate to the problem to the research objective. Okay, so one problem statement is only one subtopic. So like I said, it just for the thought course, it's just about like half or 3/4 of the page. Okay. Okay, from your how the thesis marker evaluate our proposal, because we will keep modifying our chapter 1 to chapter 3 after submission. Okay, you're talking about Young, you are talking about research study 1, right? For the master thought course.
Ya, betul.
Okay, for the master thought course, research study 1 only will be evaluated by your supervisor. Okay, there will no examiner for research study 1. But if you, once you submit your research study 1, then you want to start with your research study 2, between that, maybe you find something, you want to modify maybe your third research question. It's still okay. Okay, you have to discuss with your supervisor.
Okay.
And there may be a few things that you might need to modify from your research study 1. Also okay, because that's one is actually between you and your supervisor. So your supervisor will evaluate based on your submission for research study 1. But then if in research study 2 there is a few modification, as long as your supervisor is agree, so you can just modify it. Okay, because at the end, after you complete chapter 1 to chapter 5, then you submit your full thesis for the evaluation. Then that one, once you submit, no more to, you cannot modify anymore your thesis.
Okey, terima kasih Doktor.
Okay, sama. Okay, any more questions? For the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework, you not just put a figure of the framework. Okay, so you also have to explain in details how each element, how each item actually connect to each other. Okay, so don't but the details of the theory, I mean like the learning theory, so maybe you want to explain about the full, what is the meaning, what is the maybe the sample, the category, or so on. That one you explain in chapter 2. So in the theoretical framework, you just explain the relation, the connection between the item. Okay. So any more questions? Since we are in the detect field, do we encourage to do a research related to DDR or develop something? Okay, Dr. Diana. No, actually, it's depends on the student, because student itself, he or she is the one who's going to do the research. So it's depend on the student. You don't have to. It's no need. It's not compulsory for you to have a product. Okay, it can be just a research. Okay, so it can be maybe you just develop the instrument yourself. Okay, so it's not supposed to have a product. It depend on your skill, on your ability to complete your research. Okay, from Yong, if my research question is about teachers' perception. Okay, yes, you have to discuss about the perception topic in your chapter 2. Okay, so you have to discuss the perception in general, then you focus on the teacher's perception. Yes, that's right. Okay.
Okey, terima kasih. Thank you.
Welcome, Yong. Easter. Alright, okay. Anything more? I think we have actually more time before the next one. I think I'm not sure the topic for Dr. Zaliha. So I think maybe if no more question, you can have break for a while before starting with the next topic, the next PG Chem course. So Dr. Fendi, you want to add anything? Is Dr. Fendi?
Okay, thanks, Dr. Shikin. Thank you for your great sharing. I believe that all the students will get the benefit from the sharing. Okay, Okay, our next session will be with Dr. Zaleha, the Associate Professor Dr. Zaleha Abdullah, and I'm very sure that she will be talking about the brand, UTM brand. Okay, what the importance of her talk is about, you know, the branding, because when you want to distribute your questionnaire or you want to deal something with your subject or your respondent, you may carry the UTM brand, meaning the logo, everything about the UTM, because you are representing UTM. So Dr. Zalha will be talking about this, okay, the brand, UTM brand. So meaning that if you are distributing distributing your questionnaire or you are conducting something that related to UTM, which I think the logo you should include. Okay, this is actually what they talk about. Okay, so I'm very sure that you learn a lot from Dr. Shikin, and then about the thesis writing. The most important thing what did Dr. Shikin share is about, you know, the coherence about the thesis. Okay, the in the thesis writing. When you talk about the thesis writing, make sure that the structure of the thesis is coherent and easy to understand. So this is the talk all about, and then I believe that you learn something from these sessions. So with that, I think that's all, Dr. Shikin. Thank you for the great sharing. So over to you again, Dr. Shikin.
Okay, thank you too for everyone for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Shikin. Thank you, Dr. Fendi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shikil, Dr. Fendi.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dana.
Thank you, Doktor.
Thank you semua.
Thank you, Doktor.
See you at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock.
Oh, 11. Okay, so next session will be on 11. All right, thank you. So I will end this meeting, this WebEx, okay? Okay, thank you.